what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, November 16th, 2017. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. And we have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And we were supposed to have Alan Parks in our third hour today, but unfortunately he's not gotten back to me with a confirmation. So if he connects with us in the next 2 hours, we'll get that all put together. But otherwise, it's a 3-hour show of me. And boy, I got to tell you, I have not seen so many hacker attacks on my server since before the election. And so somebody is really out there just trying to shut down the independent media, trying to keep the public from finding out things they need to know about what's going on, mostly about what's going on with Hillary Clinton. And she's beginning to sweat. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But before that, I want to talk about Donna Brazil's book, Hacks, because I got a chance to actually sit down and go through it last night. And outside of the revelation regarding Hillary's hijacking, if you will, commandeering of the Democratic National Committee, there really isn't much of anything that's in there. In fact, it reads to me like it's a bit of a limited hangout where Donna thought she was going to go on over and resell the idea that Russia hacked the DNC servers, because that's in there, resell the idea that Sethridge was just a random murder. In other words, basically bolster the official story and sort of tease people into buying the book and reading it with that article that she put on out about how Hillary did grab control of the Democratic National Committee. So, frankly, it's kind of a disappointment, and I'm not recommending that people read it because there isn't that much in there. But there are a few takeaways. And one of them is that the reason Hillary was able to basically come on in and financially take control of the DNC was that Barack Obama's 2012 re-election campaign left the Democratic Party deeply in debt. And Obama really wasn't all that interested in going on out to do fundraising to rebuild the Democratic National Committee's coffers. So they were in a world of hurt. They were deeply in debt, and basically that opened the door for Hillary to come on in and say, I'm going to take care of your debt, got all this money. And then along with that, of course, came concessions. And Donna Brazil says this isn't really illegal, it's definitely unethical. That's as far as she's willing to go. And Donna Brazil, even though she talks about Hillary commandeering and controlling the Democratic National Committee, during the primary season, stopped short of saying that it represented a form of rigging. And she actually goes on out there and says the primary itself was not rigged. Well, I'm having a hard time with that one because we know there was a lot of skullduggery going on with illegal immigrants voting and a lot of other stuff. And I find it impossible to believe that somebody in Donna Brazil's position wouldn't have had access to the information that said, yeah, there was rigging going on. So either she was caught up in the groupthink, or even the people working close to Hillary had no idea what was really going on. Brazil does make a point of calling Barack Obama's ego titanic, but then that could apply to anybody who's at that level of politics, including Hillary Clinton herself. And Donna Brazil makes it very, very clear that she's very fond of Hillary. She felt sorry for Hillary losing the election. So, again, it's kind of a little bit of a whitewash here. Now, she does reveal that following Hillary Clinton's collapse at the 9/11 commemoration, that the Democratic Party did at one point seriously consider replacing Hillary Clinton with Joe Biden, because it was becoming very obvious that Hillary's medical conditions were going to be a major, major issue. And the final thing that you can take away from the book is that the Democratic Party is very divided. They have different beliefs, and they weren't really able to unify and come to terms, and that created quite a bit of chaos. Now then, as I said before, Hillary Clinton is starting to feel very nervous about Uranium One, And she's basically out there screaming that the Uranium One story is a distraction. If we go along with it, we're going to have a dictatorship under Donald Trump. And in any way, the story has been debunked. That's the new line coming from the Hillary Clinton campaign, is Uranium One has been debunked. You don't need to pay any more attention to it. And she's bolstered by some of the lights of the corporate media, who didn't really do the job they were supposed to. Over on Fox News, Shepard Smith came on out with his effort to debunk the Uranium One story and basically cratered it by making huge amounts of mistakes in the telling of the tale, mispronouncing names, and basically it resulted in fans of Fox News getting on social media and demanding Shepard Smith be fired over this error-filled Uranium One report. In fact, one of the most common comments is, send him over to CNN. Now, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, meanwhile, over at the National Review, Jonah Goldberg also came on out saying, yeah, there's nothing to the Uranium One deal. It's completely, there's nothing there, you don't need to look at it. His mistakes were so bad. He said that Uranium One was a South American company, which it wasn't. It was Canadian and now totally controlled by Russia's state-owned Rosatom. So they're circling the wagons. They're trying to protect what's going on here. And Hillary Clinton did an interview on Mother Jones, and she made a very cryptic statement saying that prosecuting me will cause terrible consequences. So she's basically sounding the warning that if she's prosecuted for anything, she will start blowing the whistle on all the crimes and corruptions of the U.S. government going back for the last 30 years, all the way to the heart of the narcocracy and the CIA's gun and drug running operation out of Arkansas in the 1980s under then Governor Bill Clinton. So that is her doomsday device. I'm above the law. If I go down, you'll all go down with me. Now, the identity of the secret informant in the FBI's Clinton probe into the Uranium One deal has now been revealed. His name is Christopher Campbell, and he basically came on out and did an interview with Reuters. Now, he was formerly a lobbyist for Tenex, the U.S.-based arm of Rosatom, the Russian government's nuclear agency. So this is a guy who was very, very well placed, and apparently he was reporting to the FBI. The FBI knew this stuff was all going on, and still Hillary Clinton and these other people all signed off on the deal. So now then, Chuck Baldwin came out with a very interesting article here about how the National Republican Party is pathetic, and he's basically talking about this effort to get Judge Roy Moore to step down. And by the way, he just had a press conference from down there in Alabama where he treated the whole thing with grace and humor and said it was probably one of the crowning achievement of his career in politics that he succeeded in uniting the Democrats and the Republicans together in opposition to him. And it was very well received, and I think he handled it absolutely perfectly. But Chuck Baldwin is pointing out that there are serious problems with what's going on here, with these allegations. And at this point, there's allegations. Nobody has any proof any of this really happened. And he's quoting Tim Brown over at sonsofliberty.com, who's reporting that the Washington Post reporter who broke this hit piece against Judge Moore has a rap sheet of her own. She has been charged with 4 infractions of writing bad checks in 3 different states. And apparently down in North Carolina, this reporter, this prostitute, this correspondent, was convicted of a crime punishable by up to 6 months in prison. So this is not a squeaky clean person who's out there casting the first stones. And apparently the star accuser against Roy Moore has a history of falsely accusing men of sexual improprieties. And some of her neighbors are saying that making false sexual accusations is the pattern for this woman. She's accused at least 4 Alabama pastors of sexual wrongdoing. Each time an investigation found the woman was lacking credibility, and the accusations were dismissed. And at one point, an Alabama circuit judge refused to even hear the case because of this woman's reputation as a chronic liar. So it's really starting to fall apart on this for anybody who's paying attention here in the independent media. And, of course, in the corporate media, their behavior has been totally shameful. I mean, CNN is going after Moore with everything they can, but covers up liberal Democrats. More about that a little bit later in the show here. But apparently the Media Research Center did a study and found out that the media is giving 52 times more coverage to Republican scandal than to the Democrat scandal. And they were comparing the media coverage of Roy Moore versus the coverage of Democrat Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey. And by the way, his trial ended in a mistrial, hung jury, couldn't reach a verdict. So he got off scot-free on that one here. And so the media is still very much liberally biased. Now, one of the accusers has as her lawyer Gloria Allred, who's a well-known feminist lawyer, very militant feminist lawyer. And it's getting really interesting because apparently Wolf Blitzer repeatedly asked Gloria Allred if the yearbook signature was a forgery, and Allred refused to answer 8 times. Now, the reason is very obvious. If she says it's not a forgery and it's proven to be a forgery, she could be in trouble regarding her law license. So the fact that she's refusing to answer is telegraphing right there, yes, it's a forgery. There's 2 different handwriting, 2 different ink colors. And apparently, one of the accusers, Korfman, was out there with a story that basically Roy Moore was calling her on her bedroom phone to arrange a sexual tryst. And Korfman's mother, Nancy Wells, is saying the daughter did not have a phone in the bedroom. It's completely made up. So all of these early accusers, they're starting to basically fall apart, but that's not going to stop the Democrats. They've come up with a bunch more. 4 new women have leveled sexual assault accusations against Moore, just trying to overwhelm him. They're going for the thing. There are so many accusations, at least one of them must be true, and that's a reason for him to step down from the Senate race. And apparently one of the accusers is Becky Gray, who's a retired teacher living in Gadsden at the time. And she said Moore, in his 30s, kept talking with young women, and she did her best to avoid him. And she said that Moore approached Gray and other women at a mall so many times, the manager of the mall had to eventually ban him. But unfortunately, the manager of the mall at that time was interviewed on TV and said, no, that never happened. He was never banned. Now, Beverly Nelson has a stepson, Darrell Nelson. He's now made a video saying that he doesn't believe what Beverly Nelson's claims about Judge Moore. Says he just doesn't buy it. Now, Judge Moore has sent an open letter to Sean Hannity after Hannity gave him an ultimatum to prove he was innocent within 24 hours or step down from the Senate race. Now, the first comment I have is that Sean Hannity needs to understand this nation operates on a principle of presumption of innocence until proof of guilt. What Sean Hannity is operating under is the Napoleonic Code. You're presumed guilty until you can prove you're innocent, and that's not the United States of America. But Judge Moore basically went on down and pointed out there are serious discrepancies in the story. There's the problem with the inscription in the yearbook. The inscription has the initials DA after Moore's name for district attorney, but he wasn't a district attorney when that inscription was written. He was a deputy district attorney. And by the way, there's all that commentary about, Christmas time and everything. When I was in school, yearbooks were handed out at the end of the school year, not Christmas time. This is a smear job, just plain and simple, and it shows that the Democratic tendency to play dirty is alive and well. But it just backfired on them because Senator Al Franken has now been accused of non-consensual groping. and it involves a current newscaster, sportscaster, one-time Playboy model that accompanied him on a USO tour group. And apparently Franken wrote a skit where he got to kiss this girl, and she was saying that he kept shooting the tongue. And the reason this story got traction is there is a photo of Franken groping toward this woman's breast when she's asleep. Now, she's wearing a flak jacket. It's not like he's really going to feel anything, and I'm sure he was just goofing around. But the visual really made that story sell. And it's kind of interesting to see the liberals getting out and say, well, you know, the girl has forgiven him, and so it's no big deal. We got to get back to more. Let's take a phone call here from Jim in Chicago. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. This is my question, and this is something I'm really concerned about, is the media. Okay, right now they're going after Judge Moore. I don't know if he's guilty or not, but tell me this. Where in the hell was the media when Dennis Hastert, the Speaker of the House for 8 years, a known child molester, his victims tried to go to the media, they ignored them, but this guy, until he got caught check hiding, nothing came out regarding him being a child molester. Even today, the media won't even talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a double standard. I mean, there's a whole long list of politicians who have been caught in these sexual dalliances, affairs, fooling around on their spouses and so forth, and they never got this kind of coverage. Bill Clinton's accusers, when Bill Clinton was being accused, the media just trashed them, said they were sluts and they were liars, and absolutely did everything they could to protect Bill Clinton. And it is a very obvious double standard in the corporate media.
And this is why I only listen to independent media. And Wayne Madsen was the only person that talked about Dennis Hastert and other politicians who are basically a bunch of perverts, and they're getting away with it. And the Congress people, they protect one another.
Well, they protect one another if they're inside the clique. The problem appears to be that Judge Roy Moore really is an outsider. And he has faced a lot of opposition from even within his own party during his long career. And he made mention of that during his press conference this morning. And I guess because one other outsider got in last November, that the powers that be, the deep state, if you want to call it, the narcocracy, they're just going to make darn sure no more outsiders get on in.
Well, that was very obvious when he ran in the primary. You know, Trump and other people voted for the other guy. What was his name? I can't think of his last name. But anyway, they were supporting that guy instead of Moore.
Yes.
So that's quite obvious. So, Michael, I'm going to let you go.
All right. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Now then, here is a bit of surprising news. Staunch Clinton supporter and ultra-feminist Chelsea Handler has apologized to Juanita Broaddrick and said she believes that Bill Clinton did rape her. And again, when Bill Clinton was doing what Bill Clinton was doing, the media protected him. There was this big stink where CBS 60 Minutes did a segment on Jennifer Flowers' accusations. And there's actually a video of the executive producer of 60 Minutes admitting they edited that segment to discredit Jennifer Flowers and help Bill Clinton win the nomination. And that's what the media likes to do, and that's, they don't want to admit that they're in the process of doctoring candidates, but yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. Now, House Democrats have introduced 5 articles of impeachment against Donald Trump. And apparently, this is following Democratic Representative Luis Gutierrez, along with Brad Sherman, Al Green, filing these articles saying that Donald Trump ought to be impeached for some of the comments he's made. Now, the actual rules for impeachment are very simple. Somebody must be guilty of treason or bribery. You can't impeach the president just because you don't agree with what they say, but that's what they're trying to do here. And the problem is, if the Democrats do take control of Congress next year, and it looks like they're going to have Alabama as a Democratic senator seat, they could have the votes to impeach even on the flimsiest of grounds. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, interesting memo has surfaced This is an email from the deputy director of the FBI, or the then deputy director, Andrew McCabe, wrote an email on his official government account stating that the Hillary Clinton email probe had been given special status. This according to documents released yesterday. And basically, McCabe's email said the probe was under the control of a small group of high-ranking people at the FBI's headquarters in Washington. In other words, all you lower-down people, you just stay away from this. They were compartmentalizing it. And again, if I am correct in my hypothesis, that is a major scandal still struggling to find the light. And it goes back to 1994 and the Chinagate scandal, where Bill Clinton was authorizing the sale of sensitive U.S. technology to China, and Chinese money was being poured into his re-election campaign fund. So having gotten away with it back in 1994, it's reasonable to ask, last year in the run-up to the election, in fact, before that, while she was still Secretary of State, was Hillary Clinton selling U.S. secrets to foreign powers using her private email server with weak security to deliver the material and her so-called charitable foundation to collect and launder the payments? It is a legitimate question. It needs to be asked, and it deserves an answer. Now, we're hearing from sources now. Remember that Trump dossier, the dodgy dossier about Trump and prostitutes and all the rest of that? And apparently it turns out that the dossier was never verified before Fusion GPS gave it to BuzzFeed and other publications. In fact, the word is they didn't even try to verify it. They had a document that was going to do the smear job on Donald Trump, and they just went with it. Didn't try and verify it. Didn't even say it was unverified. Now, as you know, following news that Joe Biden is considering a run in 2020 against Donald Trump and possibly against Hillary Clinton, because I don't think she's staying out. She's acting like she's trying to keep her face in the public eye. And Joe Biden has basically his own past record of questionable behavior on the sexual level. And there are a lot of videos out there of him inappropriately touching women and children. There's one of the Secret Service agents on his detail said they literally canceled the Christmas get-together at the vice presidential mansion because Biden would just walk around grabbing all the women. So over at the New York Times, they had a call for Twitter to censor all images of Biden inappropriately touching women and children. That's absolute censorship. There's no national secrets involved here. There's no military technology being given out. They're protecting the image of Joe Biden. And meanwhile, again at the New York Times, reporter Nicole Perlroth actually tweeted on out saying that what Biden was doing was really just sweet and affectionate behavior with children, and she got jumped all over on Twitter and had to delete the tweet. So the media is still out there trying to protect the Democrats, even as they get out the hammer and tongs for Roy Moore. Now, the problem is, it seems like everybody in Washington, D.C. behaves like this. Those of you who understand evolution and that we are evolved from apes understand that people in positions of power are behaving like the silverbacks. They want all the women to themselves. Makes perfect sense. But apparently the U.S. House of Representatives has paid out $15 million in harassment settlements over the last 10 years. That's how crazy it is in the halls of Congress here. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, a mistrial has been declared in the corruption trial of Senator Bob Menendez. There was a hung jury. They couldn't come to terms, and so now apparently Menendez has had his day in court. Whether they'll decide to retry him, of course, remains to be seen, but I seriously doubt it. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go to the phones here, and we're going to take Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Creepo Uncle Joe Biden. I'm telling you, Mike, they're all insane, mentally, physically. I don't know. I mean, if anybody just watches like the video compilation, the way he rolls his hands around girls' hair and the shoulders, that dude's some serious sicko. Because and kissing, like it's too many instances of him doing the same things. You know what I mean, with his hands.
Yes.
So he's got some serious issues going on, Mike. Like that dude's like stay far away from him. And did you see the video when Jeff Sessions is fixing the hairpin on the little girl's hair, and all Joe Biden's like going over there, gimme, 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 and then Jeff Sessions moves the girl and himself away from Mike. This could be an open secret in Washington about Joe Biden also, just like with Harvey Weinstein in Hollywood.
It could very well be. In fact, I think it is. I mean, this goes all the way back to John F. Kennedy and his catting around. And the reason it may be happening, I think everybody needs to ask a question. Right now, we are hearing from the women who were offended by such contact, or who are saying now that they were offended by the contact. But you have to wonder, how many women went along with it? How many women were actually flattered? Oh, my goodness, it's a senator. It's a member of the House of Representatives who wants to touch me. Oh, let's get funny and everything. And, there may be a lot of these advances that proceed forward to success. And that's intermittent reinforcement is going to keep them behaving like that.
It's absolute power. And, Mike, that law Bill Clinton signed in 1994, I believe, was the one that allowed the settlements payments. And remember, America, that's taxpayers' money they're using to settle these claims. They're not using money out of their own pocket. So you, the American sucker, taxpayer, is paying for their misdeeds. That
Absolutely.
tells you all you need to know about your oligarchy, Mike. I mean, and now Al Franken, not one, but there's another one coming out saying Al Franken. And then there was like a writer or something saying like about he said something about, I hope this gay guy, well, he was glad this gay guy died or something. I mean, Al Franken, this could kill Al Franken's seat in Minnesota, Mike. Like,
well, you know
what I mean? Like, I don't.
You know, the Democrats and Mitch McConnell started this firestorm around Moore, and now it's spreading. They can't control it, and right now everybody is fair game in this witch hunt, and it's probably going to backflash and hit a lot of people. We're hearing all these people coming on out and saying, well, it's time to go back and look at what Bill Clinton was doing. This thing is spinning out of control, primarily because the independent media is reporting on all of this stuff here. But, yeah, there's been already a second one where apparently Al Franken, back in 2000, was at this event at the Friars Club, a celebrity roast of Rob Reiner, and apparently grabbed the breast of comedian Joy Behar. Now, in the photo, it looks like she's feigning shock, and maybe she wasn't all that offended. But again, in our current politically correct climate of you don't touch, you don't look, you don't anything, this is going to start wrecking careers. And I'm not saying the careers deserve to be wrecked. Certainly in the case of Moore, to me, it's obviously a smear job. Again, this supposedly all happened 30 years ago, and none of these women ever said anything until just now. And don't forget that story we ran earlier in the week, where apparently there are these robocalls going on out to people in Alabama saying that if there's a woman in your house who was a teenager in these years, contact me at the Washington Post, and there's a reward of between $5,000 and $7,000 for anybody who'll go public on these allegations. So they're literally out there trying to harvest women who, for $5,000 to $7,000, will make these allegations. And let's be very honest, there are people who, in this very tough economic time, are going to go for that deal. And plus, their 15 minutes of fame on network TV.
But now Daily Mail's reporting Sylvester Stallone's involved from when he made Over the Top movie. Did you hear about that?
Yeah, I remember that, and I remember I worked on a Stallone film, and his nephew, just riding on his uncle's fame, was like harvesting among the female extras, and it was kind of disgusting.
Yeah, and I know his bodyguard was killed in 2013 by the police on a traffic stop, I believe, and he was also involved in that. in that hotel room. But hey, Mike, for a good movie, if you still want to watch Stallone movies, there was a low budget called I See You. I don't know if you ever seen that one.
Doesn't ring a bell.
It's actually kind of a psychological. Yeah, it's actually pretty good if you get around to watching it, if you can stomach Stallone now. You know. But all right, thanks, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And I do want to make a point. I mean, Stallone was a good actor. I mean, he created that whole Rocky character himself, and but yeah, it just seems like when you get to that level of wealth and power, you feel you can get away with that stuff. And as I said, part of the problem may be that when you are a person of wealth and power, 9 times out of 10, when you approach somebody sexually, you're going to score. And with that kind of intermittent reinforcement, you're just going to keep on going. And everybody knows it, and everybody knows what's going on, but it's only when you become a political enemy that it gets dragged up and put in the corporate media. We're going to take another phone call from Don in Iowa. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Mike, yeah, that's the reason I listened to you. You got away with words, Mike, when you said in this climate, the politically correct climate, you don't touch, you don't look, you don't do anything. You know, there's no way you can win. You can't touch. What is groping? Groping is something that everybody does. If you like girls, you're going to grope sooner or later. And then if she puts up her hand or slaps you or just says no or runs away, then it's over. But I mean, how are you going to find out anything unless you touch the girl?
Well, there are ways to approach a girl, but you're right, there's a hypersensitivity, and one of the articles that we put up today on the website was, what's wrong with millennials, and it talks about this thing about girls who go around scantily dressed string bikinis, and yet if you look at them, they're offended. There was a story in that article about a beautiful woman who dresses well at the office, and guys are asking her for dates, and she's out there saying, it's a hostile work environment. They're asking me to go out to dinner. And again, this is where this political correctness and women as a permanent victim class has gone totally over the edge of the cliff.
This country has been ruined by this whole deal. But as far as Judge Roy Moore, okay. I can't see that he did anything against the law. He dated 16-year-olds. That was legal in Alabama at that time. He was only 32. He wasn't like he was a 70-year-old man hanging around the high school. He probably thought, hey, I'm young still, and I can. I don't know what he was thinking, but I mean, he didn't break the law. Even if he dated this 14-year-old, which they say there's no proof, I don't know if that's against the law. He didn't have sex with any of these women. None of them say that he actually did it with them.
Well, there was one accuser. There's one accuser who said he tried to rape her, in a car. But again, yeah, there's no proof of any of this stuff. And when you've got the Washington Post apparently offering cash rewards for women to accuse more, it's a very obvious political smear job. And I think it may result in Moore actually winning his election, because the people of Alabama, I don't think, are falling for this. And it's I think it's rather amazing. They're trying to fight this on the national level. We're already hearing from Mitch McConnell that if Moore wins the election in Alabama, that Mitch McConnell is asking for the Senate to simply expel him. They're literally handing a Senate seat to a Democrat in an already closely divided Congress, knowing that the Democrats are trying to retake Congress next year so they can move forward with impeaching Donald Trump. So you have to wonder whose side Mitch McConnell is on. Well, the answer is it's not really Republican versus Democrat. It's the narcocracy versus everybody else.
If you compare this guy, Judge Roy Moore, to Barney Frank. Barney Frank, he had a boyfriend that was running a prostitution ring
right out of the house.
Frank's house while he was representative. Now, and after that happened, he still got reelected twice. So I mean, stuff happens. Mitch McConnell is just making himself. He's digging himself. Everybody hates him. He's an idiot. Okay, I'll let you go, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And even Roy Moore was saying that the only person who should step down is Mitch McConnell. But getting on back to Barney Frank, the story about the prostitution ring being run out of his own home by his boyfriend, that was suppressed by the media until after the election was over. So again, the media is totally on side with the liberals. Okay, now then, apparently Tillerson may be on his way out. We're seeing this article over at Politico, and the speculation is that Mike Pompeo, currently head of the CIA, may succeed Tillerson. And so we'll see what's going to happen with that. But it looks like there's going to be a bit of a shakeup, not the one we'd like to see, but still a shakeup. Now, getting on back to election fraud. And it's epidemic across the country. There's an article that came on out saying that California's voting rolls are an election integrity nightmare. In Los Angeles County, they have 44% more registered voters than they have resident voters. 44%. That's definitely enough to swing and steal an election. And it is a national disgrace. And I do wish that Trump's Commission on Election Integrity would do something about it. So far, they seem to be about as effective as his Commission on Vaccine Safety. Now, the liberals and the media are still out there trying to make Trump look bad over anything. And when Trump came on back and he did his speech at the end of his Asian tour, and he took a drink of water. Oh, stop the presses. He got thirsty. And the problem is he was drinking a bottle of Fiji water. You've seen it in the store. It's very good water. And the media just erupted saying, how can you talk about trade deficits while drinking Fiji water? The only problem is the company that bottles Fiji water is headquartered in Los Angeles. So once again, tongues are so handy and facts are so uncertain, but that is basically the media. All right, let's take a phone call. Laura in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. Ivanka Trump said there's a special place in hell for people who molest children.
Yes.
I wonder if she feels that there's a special place in hell for Jews who kill Palestinian children. Or she feels the same way about that.
Well, we'll have to ask her one day. I'm certainly in agreement with her on that first one. As far as consenting adults, whatever they want to do with each other, several other people, small appliances, I don't care. Children are special. Children have to be protected. It's one of our prime responsibilities as adults, to protect the children, keep them from harm, help them grow up to be, normal, well-adjusted human beings. And unfortunately, everybody's definition of well-adjusted differs, and certainly to the liberal, well-adjusted is, completely mind-messed and politically correct.
Well, nobody disagrees with that. But the thing is, they're not asking the question, is there any proof of he's done anything? They keep changing to that question. We have to agree that, no, we don't want children molested. But that doesn't mean that he did it.
Which he are we talking about?
Ivanka. Anybody. They're all doing it on the news. They keep changing the subject.
Well, one of the things that does concern me is that all this brouhaha over sexual assault is being used to distract the media away from Uranium Gate, Dossier Gate, and Primary Gate, which is why we're continuing to put those up at the top of our talking points every single day, because these issues cannot be allowed to die. People need to be angry about it. I mean, let's be honest. Let's be honest. When Al Franken grabs somebody, on a stage, it doesn't affect our own personal lives. Okay, but when you look at the crimes and corruptions that are being used to, first of all, divest our nation of 20% of our uranium ore, which we couldn't afford to be without, by the way, or sell our nation's secrets in exchange for donations. Those things ultimately affect every single living American, and that's why every single American ought to be paying attention to these scandals and just stay focused on them.
If I was writing his speech today, I would have said, hey, you know, what is going on in Washington that they're so frightened to have a honest man in there in the Senate?
He did say that.
You got to start getting people thinking that way.
No, he did.
They're just totally afraid of it.
Yeah, and he did say that. He said it very humorously. He said, you know, his best achievement in political career is he united the Republican and Democratic parties in opposition to him, and he handled it with a great deal of grace and humor, and I think he did very well. And I think he might still win that election. Because again, all of the early accusers who've come on out against Moore, they've all been discredited. And especially with that forged inscription in the yearbook, it's very obvious this is all being made up, and that they're trying to find new accusers to come on out and simply, you know, just have so many women accusing him that you know, everybody will say, well, he must have done something. But again, it was 30 years ago, and I don't even remember what I was doing 30 years ago, to be very honest.
Yeah.
I have to go look at my photo albums and say, oh, is that what I was doing? You know. Okay.
Yeah. Juan Williams on Fox. Juan Williams said, the reason I don't like Roy Moore is because he put God before the Constitution. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe he said that.
Well,
that's all about, because
they're grasping at straws.
Homosexual marriage.
They're grasping at straws.
Somehow they think that that's a constitutional right.
All right, well, Laura, we're going to let you go here. We're coming up on a commercial break. Thank you very much for the phone call. And continuing this little media tit-for-tat, Russia has notified Radio Free Europe and Voice of America that they are now going to have to be registered as foreign agents inside Russia. And apparently Russia is now notifying something like 9 or 10 U.S.-based media outlets that they are now considered foreign agents inside Russia, and they'll have to be registered, which will subject them to scrutiny and so forth. It's this tit-for-tat situation that's going to spiral out of control. All of it representing, of course, an attack on the free press, even though we understand the corporate media is hardly objective and unbiased in any of this. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, Russia has blocked the U.S. drafted UN resolution to renew the inquiry into the chemical weapons attacks in Syria because the old mandate just is about to expire. And Russia vetoed it because they have their own version of a resolution calling for an investigation that will probably be a lot more objective and balanced, and the U.S. is probably going to veto that. Either way, the issue of going on in and saying, oh, yes, we found evidence that Assad is gassing his own people, trust us, trust us, trust us, appears to be dead in the water. In Syria, fierce fighting has erupted in eastern Ghouta, and apparently Arar al-Sham officially declared a start of the operation to capture the armored vehicle base and nearby area from the Syrian Arab army in eastern Ghouta. So the fighting is continuing over there. Moving on down here. Everyone's been talking about Mattis, who made this comment the other day, that the United States had a right to be in Syria because they had a UN mandate, which they did not. And so now they're trying to backpedal and say, well, it's all about an interpretation of something the UN said, where basically there was a UN authorization to fight the Daesh terrorist group, to fight ISIS. And so the U.S. position is, well, we're fighting ISIS in Syria, even though ISIS is pretty much gone from Syria, and Syria is asking the United States to leave. So they're weasel wording their way around, but it's obvious at this point the U.S. has no intention of leaving Syria. For that matter, they have no intention of leaving Afghanistan. They have no intention of leaving Iraq. They're trying to garrison the world the way the ancient Roman Empire did, until Rome stretched itself too thin. They lost 3 legions in Germany, and at that point they couldn't manage their empire, and it began to fall apart. Meanwhile, down in Israel, Netanyahu once again is threatening Iran, and basically saying that Iran is plotting to destroy the Israeli regime from Syria, and said that Israel will stop at nothing to contain Iran, even if it has to act alone. Well, you know it's not going to stay that way. Because if Israel attacks Iran, Russia has already indicated they're going to come in on the side of Iran. The U.S. will come in on the side of Israel, and we're going to have a real world war, U.S. against Russia. And it's going to be bloody, it's going to be long, and if it goes nuclear, it's going to destroy both of our countries. And off to one side, there will be Israel laughing their heads off at how stupid we both were. Because with the U.S. and Russia destroyed, Israel, with their nuclear arsenal, will be in charge of the Middle East. And through that oil, in charge of the world economically. And we're being drawn closer and closer to that. Now, Saudi Arabia is making nice with Israel. It's causing a bit of a backflash. And the Israeli military chief gave an unprecedented interview to Saudi media, pushing the line, Iran is the biggest threat to the Middle East. Oh, those horrible Iranians. Don't let them fool you because they haven't started a war in 200 years. They're a threat, I promise you. We'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. Now, Israel has announced they're ready to share intelligence on Iran with Saudi Arabia. And this came out when the Israeli military chief was being interviewed on Saudi media. And it definitely indicates the two countries are pulling together into a coalition to bring a regional war to the Mideast, focusing on Iran. There's only one small problem. Much of Israeli intelligence turns out to be just so much made-up nonsense. Remember, Israel was out there insisting that Saddam had all these horrible weapons of mass destruction. Israel claimed that Iraq was building nuclear bombs underneath the power station at Osirak, and that was their justification to destroy the power station. And then later on, international experts, inspectors, took a look at the ruins of the power station, and all that was there was a power station. So if anybody from Saudi Arabia is listening to this show, you be very careful about what Israel is telling you, because it's always going to work to Israel's interest, not your own. And in one of the most alarming developments here, this is coming out of Information Clearinghouse and a couple of other sources. Apparently, Saudi Arabia, in order to establish relations with Israel, is willing to give up on the Palestinian issue so that they can join with Israel in a war against Iran. Now, that has been a major issue in the Middle East for decades. The fact that Israel was stealing Palestinian land, they wouldn't recognize Palestine's right to exist, and now Saudi Arabia, in their desire to have a war against Iran, is going to make nice with Israel and sacrifice the Palestinians in the process. Now, over in Riyadh, they're making this statement now, enough is enough, and they're calling on Hezbollah to disarm amid aggressive Iranian actions. And Saudi Foreign Minister Adel Al-Jubeir said that Hezbollah has to disarm and become a normal, regular political party before the situation in Lebanon will stabilize. And basically said that Riyadh's policy is a reaction to Iran's aggression. So they're just making up all this stuff about this person's aggressing, we have to make a war on them. Yes, Iran came to the aid of Syria. They were asked for their assistance. But Iran has not initiated a war of conquest against another country in 200 years. It's not their nature. And I'm sure that Hezbollah is going to realize that surrendering their weapons opens the door to an attack. Because too many countries fell for that thing. Libya, oh, if you give up your nuclear weapons program, we promise we will leave you alone. Then they invaded Libya. Same thing with Iraq. If you give up your chemical weapons, we promise we'll leave you alone. Then they invaded Iraq. Same thing with Syria. Give up your chemical weapons and we promise we'll leave you alone. Then they invaded Syria. Not going very well, but you get the drift. There's a pattern here. And I'm sure Hezbollah sees it just as North Korea sees it. If you give up your weapons, you will be invaded. Now, Saudi Arabia, the motives for the purge seem to be becoming a little bit more clear. There was this purge of rivals to the Crown Prince and his agenda, And they're being treated very nicely. They're in a hotel with luxury comforts. They're not really in jail. But apparently, the Saudi government is now offering the arrested royals a deal. We'll let you go if you give us a huge amount of your money. 70% of their net worth. So it's all about the cash, shaking down the princes for the cash, consolidating the wealth, because Saudi's government is in serious trouble, and now it looks like they're going to try and fight a war. By the way, apparently the Saudi king has decided he will step down next week. Remember, a couple of weeks ago, they announced that he was going to abdicate the throne and allow the crown prince to become king. Then a few days later, they said, no, he wants to stay on. Now it's back to he will step down next week. Let's take a phone call here. Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Just wanted to comment on the Saudi Arabia-Israel thing about Israel, again, for the second time in 100 years. This is a sort of a replay of the Balfour Declaration.
Balfour,
where
yes.
They are where they're willing to take to deliver the United States into war, and that's part of the calculation here, in order to gain acceptance from other people for their illegal occupation of another land, just like they did against the Turks and blah blah blah. But here we go. The calculation here is that if Israel's involved, that means the United States will be involved, because you know what? Saudi Arabia wouldn't last 5 minutes against Iran. But Israel can deliver the United States just like the Jews could deliver the United States in World War I. Exactly the same thing as the Balfour Declaration.
Yes.
And that's what's going on here.
Okay.
So, again, another war, just like the Iraqi war, just like the Persian Gulf War, another war delivered to our doorstep by the Zionists.
Absolutely. And like I said, if the U.S. and Russia get into a mutually destructive war and nuke each other, Israel would be absolutely ecstatic, because with the two superpowers gone, Israel, with their nuclear weapons, would control that Middle East. And through the Middle East oil, would economically control pretty much the rest of the world. So that's where we are.
That is where we are.
Anything else?
And their fifth column in the United States can deliver it too, just like they delivered us into World War I.
Well, it does look like we're headed that way. All right, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And let me just get this one up here real quick before the next attack on my server. And we'll talk about this one a little bit later in the show, but it's horrible, horrible story here. Now then, interesting little story coming out of alwaqt.com, where the West is eyeing a nuclear deal-style missile pact with Iran. In other words, they've given up on the idea of a renegotiation of the P5+1. They're just going to leave it in place. But now they're going to pressure Iran for a whole new deal so that it will give up its long-range ballistic missiles. And I don't think Iran is going to go for that. Again, because of the examples we saw in Libya, Iraq, and Syria. Surrendering your weapons is an engraved invitation to be invaded. Now, Iran went along with the P5+1 deal because they weren't really building nuclear weapons. But they are building defensive missiles. They want a deterrent to deter invasion. So I don't think that's going to work either. Now, for ordinary consumers like you and I, you need to understand that this is going to cost us all. Not just in terms of our tax money and the lives of our children, in our wallets, in our daily lives. And there's a story out of Russia today that says experts are predicting if war breaks out between Iran and Saudi Arabia, it could send oil to $300 per barrel. That's a 500% increase, and it will impoverish the world. And anything that is connected with oil and gas will go up in price. The cost of delivering goods will. Might actually spur local manufacturing. Get away from this, giant Amazon, and we'll just ship everything everywhere. The shipping costs are going to go through the roof. Cost of gas will go through the roof. Anything produced using petroleum-powered machinery like food or manufactured goods, it's all going to increase in price because of this need to get Iran here. I have a message from our control room. Dustin in New Jersey, would you call back in because apparently somebody wants to connect with you. There's a message waiting for you. Thank you very much here. Over in Somalia, yes, we're back in Somalia again. Didn't learn anything from Black Hawk Down. Apparently the United States military says it's killed several militants in another drone strike in Somalia. This brings the number of raids this year to 28. Well, how do you know they're militants? Well, they're dead, aren't they? They had to be militants. We wouldn't kill innocent bystanders, would we? Now, down in Zimbabwe, Mugabe is in custody. The army has taken control of Zimbabwe. They have elevated the previously fired vice president to the presidency. They're saying it's not a coup, but it certainly looks like one. U.S. Senator Jim Inhofe has said he's encouraged by Zimbabwe's rejection of Mugabe and the reinstitution of democracy. By golly, this is starting to feel like another U.S.-backed regime change to me. And one of the reasons that may have led to it was that back in 2016, Zimbabwe's President Mugabe basically started shutting down foreign owners of Zimbabwe's mines, principally diamond mines, and nationalized the industry. And by golly, you don't tick off those multinational corporations, especially diamond corporations, without getting somebody angry at you. But with Mugabe gone, this now makes Queen Elizabeth II is now the world's oldest head of state. And she's 91 years old and already starting to pass off some of the royal duties to Prince Charles, who is actually not very popular with the British subjects. Polls are showing that they would rather that Prince William, who's third in line for the throne, succeed as king. But I don't think that that's going to happen. Down in Yemen, 17 million need food. Hospitals and water pumps are running out of fuel. They'll be totally out in the next 3 weeks. There's nothing getting on in. 40,000 children have died of starvation in Yemen. And all of this is supported by the United States government, which is providing supplies, material support, intelligence, and aerial refueling for the Saudi warplanes that are committing these atrocities. They're being refueled by United States Air Force tankers. Now, the former German Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder, in an interview with Ziet, has accused the Ukrainian government of waging war against the Donbass. Yesterday we were reporting that Kiev is just openly violating the ceasefire in multiple locations. So it looks like that's another flashpoint. Now, Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko has met with the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs, Aaron Wes Mitchell, and they discussed a wide variety of issues. But basically, the U.S. is expressing its readiness to increase the price for Moscow if the aggression continues. And again, nobody can prove there's any aggression. The aggressor is Kiev against the Donbass. But that's the new big lie. Iran is the aggressor. Russia is the aggressor. We're only responding to their aggressions, really. Just because we're putting our weapons over there and they're not sending their weapons over here, they're still the aggressors. Take our word for it. And unfortunately, now they're talking about restoring the territorial integrity of Ukraine, meaning they're going to try and take Crimea back, possibly by invasion. It's insane. It's insane. Now, over in Korea, Seoul, South Korea, is warning Donald Trump that the United States must not attack North Korea without the consent of the South Korean government, because they're very concerned that if there is a war, the immediate fallout is going to be hitting their territory. Even though they've now come to terms with having the THAAD missiles there, those THAAD missiles, there's only so many of them. They're not all that good. They're not as good as the Russian air defense missiles. And North Korea has a huge amount of conventional artillery. And THAAD can't really intercept an artillery shell. It's designed to intercept incoming missiles. Now, North Korea has come on out and said, if you want us to give up our nuclear weapons, we're willing to if the U.S. does as well. Seems like a fair deal to me. After all, the United States is the only country to ever actually use nuclear weapons of mass destruction on the civilians of another country. Of course, the U.S. attitude is everybody else has to give up their weapons except us because we're going to come and invade you anyway. We just want to have an easier time of it. Now, the U.S. military has come on out with a claim, basically a KPNX article, claiming that the B-1 bombers can drop nuclear weapons and that there are secret silos of nuclear hardware that will rain destruction down on North Korea. There is only two problems with that. First of all, those missile silos are not secret. You can find them in Google Earth. And second, the B-1 used to have the capacity to carry nuclear weapons, but that ended in 1994 because of the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, and the bomb bays of the B-1s have been converted to carry conventional weapons. Now, I'm sure with a little bit of work, they can be reconverted back to carry nuclear weapons, but they are not nuclear capable now. What this is going to do is inflame North Korea's concerns because the U.S. is currently flying the B-1 up along their coastlines. And so the U.S. military is sending a message. They might be carrying nuclear weapons. You cannot know. They're trying to goad North Korea into doing something. And if that fails, there'll be a false flag. And obviously, I'm very concerned about a week from today when we're all eating turkey and watching the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade and football games. It's a perfect target for some kind of a false flag to kick off these wars. Now, as you know, here in Hawaii, they've been getting us ready for an attack by North Korea. By adding a new tone to the emergency sirens. So in addition to the tsunami warning, we now have the nuclear attack warning sirens. And that seems to be about all the preparations they've really done. We don't have bomb shelters or fallout shelters for civilians here in Hawaii. And with most of the ground being congealed lava, they're very hard to dig. So it's not going to be easy. But those are our preparations. But now, up in Alaska, the people of Alaska are being told to prepare for a North Korean attack because the North Korean missiles could hit Alaska in just 20 minutes. And what they're being told to do is stockpile food and water. Now, Alaska's a really big place. And most of the U.S. military bases, which you would presume would be a target for a North Korean missile, are well away from the population centers. But it's just ramping up the fear. Oh, the North Koreans are coming. The North Koreans are coming. I'm not all that worried about a North Korean attack. Assuming their missiles are accurate, their current largest warhead will make a big bang on Pearl Harbor. But we'll lose some windows up here where we are, but that's about it. If we go to war with Russia and or China, and they nuke the place, their standard warheads will just melt this island into glass, especially the Chinese warheads. Those are just horrendously huge. Now, adding complexity to an already too complicated situation, there is going to be a delegation from Russia's State Duma, the lower house, that will visit North Korea end of this month, November 27th. And it's being called a friendly visit. And they may be there to discuss Russian support for North Korea in the event of a U.S. incursion. It's a world war. They're just waiting for the big bang where they can say, this is where it officially started. Sinking of the Lusitania, start of World War I. Pearl Harbor, start of World War II. Actually, the wars were ongoing long before those events. But they like to have a big event where they can say, yes, it's a world war. We can bring back the draft. Now, getting on down to the Philippines, the story there was that Obama basically wrecked relations between the Philippines and the U.S. by presuming to lecture Duterte on how he is trying to deal with the massive drug problem in the Philippines. And then that basically ruined relations. And then all of a sudden, ISIS showed up in the Philippines. And the U.S. was talking about, oh, we need to intervene. We need to intervene in the Philippines. And the Philippines was able to get ISIS out. And now it turns out that China gave them assistance. And Duterte is now lauding China's help in the Marawi battle, which basically put an end to this whole thing. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go to the telephones here. Andrea in Oklahoma. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, I sent you an email, and it's on a postcard, but I also wanted to make that comment about China hitting Hawaii and turning it into glass. Well, they wouldn't have been able to do that if the Clintons wouldn't have given away highly classified information called the interballistic missile, which now they can do those things because they were given that information. And that, to me, is treason.
Well, at the time, now let's be fair, at the time, China wasn't really considered an enemy. You know, all of this, Russia's our enemy and Iran's our enemy and all that's only happened over the, since George W. Bush got in and they started on this war agenda.
Well, I mean, you just don't give away that kind of information. It was classified. It was in New Mexico. And it's just, that was something you just don't do.
I agree with you. I agree with you, but unfortunately the Clintons treat everything in the government like it's their own personal property, and if they want to sell it for the right price, they'll sell it. That certainly happened back in 1994. Again, if you look at the way they've handled themselves throughout their entire career, whatever they're in charge of, they treat like it's their personal property, and it isn't. It's the property of the people. So
I sent you a postcard. And I already called my representatives, Imhoff, Langford, and to say, you know, put a bee in the president's ear if you ever get a chance to talk to him. Tell him to fire Jeff Sessions. He's a big monster in the swamp still. He's another thing they need to clean out. But the postcard is about the same thing, and I figured if it was a postcard, and every mailman and everybody that sees it, that it crosses their hands, and as they deliver it to the White House, it's going to, you know, it says, fire Jeff Sessions on one side, you know, and then it has, you know, but anyway, I sent you, it's JPEG, so you shouldn't be afraid to open it. But
no, I
didn't put anything on.
I already looked at it. The problem is people would have to print this out on cardstock. Or else put it in an envelope. But if Americans want Trump to fire Jeff Sessions, they can hit that White House comment line, or they can send a paper letter. Postcards are more effective when they're on cardstock, and everybody along the way gets to see that message here. But I do thank you for it, and I did look at it, and I'll probably post it in the reader's letter section. Okay?
Okay, I just figure we could all go to the quick copy, and that's big enough that they could put on an 8.5 by 11, at least get 3 or 4 copies of it, and you know, just do what you can. I mean, anyhow, I love your show.
Thank you very much. I certainly will. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. And getting on back to the news, as you know, the United States government has required Russia Today to register as a foreign agent on the basis of this 1938 law that was passed specifically to deal with the Nazis. And now it looks like the U.S. government, having gotten away with that, is basically starting to expand the reach. And the next target may be Xinhua, Chinese news. And there's a new report from a congressional commission has accused the Beijing-owned outlet of intelligence gathering on behalf of Chinese leadership, and they want it to be listed as a foreign agency. They're going to do this to everybody who doesn't agree with their agenda. They're starting to, it's like the Berlin Wall all over again. They're going to build a wall around us we can't see through, so all we hear is the official U.S. government version of whatever is going on, and we're not allowed to see an alternative reality. Now, Steve Bannon is out there pounding on the drum for confrontation with China. He's out there saying if America doesn't thwart these 5 things, China will be a hegemonic power. And basically saying that since the fall of the Berlin Wall, he's accusing that the U.S. government kind of kicked on back and said, we're the global superpower. And unfortunately, that reality has changed because both Russia and China have grown economically since then. And Bannon is out there saying, we have to go back to being number 1 on the world. Okay, Steve, here's your rifle. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we take this next phone call, it looks to me like Hillary Clinton is hitting the panic button. Fox News is now reporting that Hillary Clinton is out there saying that Donald Trump's appointing of a special counsel to investigate her is an abuse of power, and it would be just like the persecution under a dictatorship. And so it looks to me like she's beginning to realize that her immunity may have run on out. Of course, she was out there with that strange warning on Mother Jones that if she's charged, terrible things will happen. And that is going to make her a serious threat to much of that narcocracy. And I think the only reason she's still alive is she's got lots and lots of dead man switches out there. But I think there may be an effort to try and somehow get her to just go away. Certainly the Democratic Party does not want to have the image of Hillary following them into future elections here. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Tom in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Tom, are you there? Tom, going once? Going twice?
He's here, my phone.
There you are. Okay, Tom, what's on your mind?
Yeah, can you hear me, Michael?
I hear you now.
Okay, yeah, Michael, what I was going to say is, first off, this Menendez,
yes,
that hung jury with that thing, a bunch of crap, I don't know what is.
Yes.
That guy should be charged. Oh, yeah. Okay,
or retried.
He should be charged, Michael, but
he was charged.
He should definitely have to be retried.
I would agree with you on that one because, again, when you're dealing with this level of corruption, all you have to do is just get to one of the jurors and have them sit steadfastly saying, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. And even if the other 11, or in this case 10, because one of the jurors, I think, was removed over some problem, then you get a hung jury. But the judge talked to all the jurors, and they said, we're absolutely convinced in our positions, and we're not going to change. And he said, all right, it's a mistrial. I seriously doubt he'll be retried.
Well, Michael, no, one guy that quit, he had to go on vacation. He couldn't stay because he was going on vacation. He already had planned.
Yes.
But that's going to be taken care of, I'm sure, down the road. This guy, Al Franken, now what they're doing to Moore, I want Al Franken to step down. He needs to resign for his Senate seat. Because the same thing they're doing to Moore, this guy Franken's even worse. They got photos and everything of Al Franken.
Yes.
Al Franken needs to step down as a senator. You're not U.S. senator from Minnesota, and they have to be open seat for election time. That's one thing. Another thing, Mike, what I really want to discuss, I was in a store today.
Okay, Tom, can you slow down a little bit and put your mouth a little closer to the microphone because you're not coming through clearly?
Okay. Yes, Michael, can you hear me now?
I hear you now.
Okay, well, anyway, I was reading one in a National Enquirer newspaper, and it was talking about Charlie Sheen in the deep state of Hollywood, what Charlie Sheen was doing to childhood actors as they were kids, and they had the story about Corey Haim, not Corey Feldman, but Corey Haim, which is the best friends of Corey Feldman, was Corey Haim, the one that died of the drugs.
Yes.
Well, in the article, you have to read it. You can have your producer look at it, and it's in the National Enquirer that talks about how Charlie Sheen was actually raping these young kids when they were 11, 12 years old. So maybe you want to do a story on that down the road, but that's something I really blew my mind about Charlie Sheen. But getting back to politics,
well,
Michael,
before you get back to before you get back to politics, at this point, I'm going to start de-emphasizing all of these sex allegation stories going on here because I want to put the focus back on Russiagate, Primarygate, Dossiergate, because that's where the American people need to be paying attention to right now. And I think it's more than a coincidence that at the same time we're hearing about talk about a special counsel and investigations into Uranium One, that all of a sudden the liberal media is just going crazy about all these sexual allegations. We're being conditized, is what's going on. And remember how during the Whitewater investigation, they hid all the details about government-sanctioned gun and drug running out of Arkansas behind Monica Lewinsky giving the president a Hummer in the Oval Office.
You're right, Michael. You're 100% right. I totally agree. That's what I'm saying. I just believe this is part of the deep state. The deep state is what it is, a deep state. But, Michael, speaking of that, though, that's the thing, too. It's been a year now that Donald Trump's been president. I'm still waiting. They have the prototypes of the border wall. I'm wondering if that wall will ever get built. And I know this guy, the Congressman Franks and Bratt, like Bratt and Franks, whatever, both of them, they're going to be writing a bill, I heard, about the DACA. Now, I'm wondering, are these parents of these kids going to be held accountable for breaking the law? And are they going to be deported out of here? And if they go back to their countries, are the kids going to follow them back to their country of origin?
Well, here's the thing. First of all, apparently this group has bought a plot of land right on the border, and they're going to refuse permission for the wall to be built across it. Of course, there's an eminent domain issue there as well. To be very honest, I don't think we really needed a wall so much as we needed to enforce the existing laws that we already have. And that is really the problem. Congress is passing laws left and right, but nobody's enforcing those laws, and that's why we have this out-of-control immigration problem. Okay?
Yeah, I agree with you, Michael. That's why I say I just want to see what's going to happen in the next 6 months with this wall, if that even gets built. So I just want to see what's going to eventually potentially happen here, because I think if they don't start doing something, the Republicans are going to get annihilated in the 2018 election.
I would agree with you on that one.
The Democrats are going to take over.
You know, the
liberals are going to take right back over. It's going to be the same thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, both sides. Yeah, I mean, both parties are just equally corrupt. It's just which ones get to stick their noses into that trough of public money and fatten themselves a little bit more. Anyway, Tom, we're going to let you go. We got a lot of news to cover here, and we did connect with our third-hour guest at the top of the hour. So I'm going to have a lot of this stuff that's going to be left over and go into tomorrow. Apparently, over in France's National Assembly yesterday, one of the lawmakers, Mayor Habib, got up and just launched on this anti-Palestinian diatribe, which apparently was so offensive that several other lawmakers just stood up and walked on out. And I don't think this was done in a vacuum, because I think we're seeing a renewed push by Israel to basically grab what's left of Palestine, possibly launch a new attack into Gaza. It's been a couple of years since the last one, and Israel tends to do these things regular as clockwork. Bottle rocket comes over the fence, hits a bunch of dirt, and Israel goes on in and bombs the heck out of Gaza. Now, Israel's Jerusalem Affairs Minister is out there saying that it's time to push 1 million West Bank settlers in to the West Bank, and that will end the possibility of a two-state solution. And we know that that has been Israel's agenda all along, because if you look at a map of those illegal settlements that are being built in the West Bank, they're being strategically located to break up the contiguous landmass. So there isn't going to be any contiguous area that could be called the State of Palestine. And now it looks like they're really accelerating this. Meanwhile, over at Site Intelligence Group, run by Rita Katz, whose father was executed as an Israeli spy, they're out there pumping out the propaganda saying that ISIS is going to stage an attack on the Vatican in Christmas. Oh, yes, let's get all the Christians and the Muslims fighting each other. Israel would certainly like that as well. This is a very alarming story. Apparently, Gallup has just released a poll in which it is claimed, and I'm not believing this, that 49% of Americans favor mandatory military service for U.S. youth. And folks, if I were you, I would go out and ask all your friends and neighbors what their opinion is. Because this smells like the ramp up of propaganda to get us all ready for a military draft. Now, article coming out of shtfplan.com. The Saudi coup is signaling war. We were already seeing that, Lebanon and Iran in the crosshairs, and possibly a new world order reset. And they go on in there and say that this war in that region could signal the end of the petrodollar and the end game of the U.S. economy, because the new world order wants a single global currency. And the dollar is not going to be it. They've already been talking about it, calling it the globo. sort of taking the euro and moving it up in size. So part of the New World Order plan is the destruction of the U.S. economy here. Now, Yanis Varoufakis over in Germany is saying that Merkel basically lied to Germany about the Greek financial bailout in a bid to save billions of euros for Germany's banks. This according to the former Athens finance minister. And all of this comes out from this ridiculous idea of a private central bank that is allowed to create money out of thin air and then loan it into circulation at interest, whether it's the Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank. And it's not an honest money system. It is a system of enslavement. Now, France technically ran out of money last Tuesday. And the rest of the Europe is basically at the end of their funds as well, which means from now till the end of the year, they're going to be borrowing more from the ECB to keep running and sticking the future generations with the principal and interest payments. Now, as you probably already heard on the corporate media, the House has voted their version of the GOP tax bill through. And apparently there's still a few issues to settle between the Senate version and the House version. I don't know why the Senate has a version, because under the Constitution, revenue measures originate in the House. The Senate can only ratify. But there's still going to be a little bit of wrangling there. Hopefully they're going to keep that Obamacare mandate repeal. And it's interesting because Democrats are now saying the repeal of the Obamacare mandate means higher premiums and people losing health insurance, which means they have not been paying attention to the last few years, or they hope that you haven't. Because when Obamacare came on in, the premiums skyrocketed, double digits every single year, along with those deductibles. And people were giving up health insurance because they couldn't afford it anymore and accepting the IRS penalty. Now, some of the last changes in the Republican tax plan include tax cuts for producers of beer, wine, and liquor, and a new provision that might be called the Harvey Weinstein tax. This is an end to corporations' ability to deduct attorneys' fees and settlement payments in sexual harassment or abuse cases, if there is a non-disclosure agreement. So companies like Weinstein's production company, when they pay out the settlements and the attorney fees, they are not going to be allowed to take those off the taxes. Now, according to an article in drhousingbubble.com, the San Francisco housing market is near bubble risk, according to a UBS report. And apparently the majority of Bay Area renters are now planning on leaving. They simply can't afford to be there anymore. And that, of course, will trigger the bubble to burst, and we're going to have another mess on our hands here. In fact, all over the world, there are huge numbers of bubbles that all seem to be about to burst all at the same time, so you need to be very, very careful. Here's a very interesting article. This is out of Pravda. Russian nuclear energy conquers the world, and no, they're not talking about bombs. They're talking about Russia's construction of nuclear power plants around the world. And Rosatom has been winning competitions against major Western companies. And I'm sure that having access to 20% of the U.S. uranium didn't hurt them in accomplishing that goal here. Now, getting on back to the EU, Poland is in a little bit of a crisis. There may be a Pexit on the way. Brussels is threatening to suspend rights if Warsaw doesn't obey values, whatever that means. And it may be in a response to that large, massive nationalist demonstration in Warsaw that the Polish government refused to condemn. In fact, they called it a beautiful thing. Now, down in the Czech Republic, Prague is going to host a gathering of European anti-migrant forces. They are all fed up with this open borders issue. It's caused nothing but expense, crime, rape, disease, illness. They've had enough of that as well. And even Brussels itself is not immune, because they've now in their second day of full riots and destruction by criminal Moroccan youth. Yeah, that one worked out really well for them. Meanwhile, violence has broken out. Thousands of angry demonstrators are in the streets of Nantes, France, to protest at new government reforms. They're protesting against Macron. They do not want him. Now, over in Great Britain, the battle over Brexit is continuing. Mendelsohn is out there saying that they need to dismiss the Brexit election because the correct facts were not given to the voters. He's demanding a second vote. He's being joined in this by Goldman Sachs chief Lloyd Blankfein, saying we need a second vote. We need a second chance to steal this election. Meanwhile, Noel Gallagher is out there saying the people voted for Brexit. Get over it. Now, remember the other day where Theresa May was out there saying, oh, the Russians, they interfered, they pushed for Brexit, they're interfering in everything that we've got. Researchers have discovered that there were only a total of 400 tweets from Russia that addressed the Brexit vote, some on both sides. And now Theresa May has had to admit, standing in Parliament, that there is no evidence of Russian interference in Brexit. She's had to back down on that one. So this idea of blaming Russia for everything that goes wrong, hopefully we've seen the end of it because they've gone to that well way too many times. Story coming on out of Aleppo News. We talked about this earlier in the week. We're going to bring it up again. The mother of the convicted Boston bomber, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, is saying that the FBI framed her sons and that Americans are the real terrorists. And again, we posted our graphic showing evidence regarding the bombs and regarding the Tsarnaev's backpacks that would create a reasonable doubt of guilt in any juror's mind. But Tsarnaev's trial was a kangaroo court. His court-appointed defense attorney walked in and said, yeah, he did it. What kind of a defense is that? That lawyer ought to be disbarred for that. Now then, getting on to this latest shooting rampage in California, it's a huge embarrassment. Police are admitting they knew he had a stockpile of guns. They knew there was a court order barring him from having guns because of past violence. They ignored it. And the result was he went on this shooting rampage. And they're trying to point the finger of blame over at the Army for not reporting domestic violence. But again, there was already a court order. Now it turns out that apparently the U.S. Army fails to report such violent incidents in their ranks up to 20% to the FBI. Only 80% of the reports are being forwarded. So there are a lot of veterans who are out there in conditions of mental distress that are slipping through the cracks. And again, we don't need more gun laws. We need the existing laws to be enforced. We'll be right back. Aloha America, welcome back to the show here. We're talking about guns and gun laws. We're talking about the California shooting where there was a court order on this guy barring him from owning firearms, and yet the police did nothing while he was building up his stockpile. The problem is we don't need new laws. We need to enforce the laws that are already out there. But, of course, the Democrats are taking a different position. They want more gun laws. They want to ban everything. And the Boston Globe came right on out with an article saying it's time for a complete disarmament of the American people. And they are getting absolutely manic about it because apparently Gabrielle Gifford's gun control group has released a report detailing 9 products that they say should be banned, the new bump stocks. And the products include binary triggers, trigger cranks, 50 caliber rifles, high capacity shotguns, AK and AR style pistols, pistol arm braces, pistol blade stabilizers, incendiary, tracer, armor piercing ammunition, and I am not kidding you, muzzle loaders. They want to ban muzzle loaders. Now, I'm sorry, when was the last time a 7-Eleven store was held up with a flintlock? What they want is complete and total disarmament, which is a pattern in all tyrannies. Once you take away the guns, the people will do what you tell them to do. Now, good news for all the dopers out there. Opium production is up 87% in Afghanistan. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. And, of course, the article goes on to say the failure of the U.S. counter-narcotics strategy in Afghanistan. Well, give it back to the Taliban. When the Taliban were in charge of Afghanistan, there were no opium poppies growing. If you were caught with an opium poppy, they'd cut your hand off. A little dramatic, but it did work. But now Afghanistan, under the influence of the installed U.S. puppet regime, is now the world's largest opium producer and exporter. It produces 80% of the world's opium, and much of it is pouring out of the streets of America and into our pharmacies. Where do you think they got all the opium for the opioid crisis here? Now, getting on back to the Dakota Access Pipeline, story came on out here in The Intercept, where apparently the Dakota Access Pipeline Company paid mercenaries to build a conspiracy lawsuit against the environmentalists. And it had nothing to do with the pipeline's physical security. They just wanted the protesters to be removed. So a little bit of corruption going on there. All righty. Interesting little statement. Truth News is out there saying that even though there was never any evidence against Kaspersky, the U.S. will not retract the accusations that Kaspersky's antivirus was being used to steal information from government computers. Kaspersky has responded by pointing out that the hack into the NSA wasn't into the NSA, but to an NSA employee's home computer on which he had made copies or installed copies of software he brought home from work, which he wasn't supposed to do. But apparently this home computer was compromised with the Moke's back door, which allowed the hackers to basically go on in and say, oh, wow, look at all this great little NSA stuff. We're going to copy it off. We're going to take a break for station identification. We're going to be back here with Alan Parks after these few words. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And joining us on the Skype connection right now is Alan Parks. And Alan, the reason I wanted you on the show, thank you for being here today, is the FDA just recently came on out and said there's absolutely no truth to the claim that cannabis oil has any effect on cancer whatsoever, and you, from your own personal experience, know otherwise. So can you first of all tell us a little bit about yourself, and then tell us about your experience with cancer?
Hey, Mike, thanks very much for asking. And unfortunately, at this time, I'm kind of torn between laughing my head off at this bogus claim and the fact that anybody would believe it based on the available research that's only just a few clicks away with your fingertips. And I don't know how they're getting away with it. I'm not really sure, because on the one hand, I want to laugh, but on the other hand, it is a crime, the suppression of information, etc. So I'll tell you who I am. It's actually Park with no S. That's okay. It happens all the time. I'm a noun, not a verb. And so I'm a comedian in Canada. I've been doing that for quite some time, doing stand-up. Eventually got on a television show of some repute up here in Canada, relatively famous across the nation, and was having a fun time, I guess, kind of thing with that, being on TV and making more money than you ought to. And then eventually the show was canceled, and a couple of years later we were doing these annual specials instead of a season, and this is when I'm getting sicker and sicker all year. 2013, it turned out I was deteriorating, and I wasn't sure why. Had been visiting the doctor several times, running tests, trying to find out what was happening, and everything was turning up negative, as they say, which is good, and it means they don't have a positive ID on some culprit. And but unfortunately, I guess they were running the wrong tests. As I further deteriorated, it was a pretty quick slide from early November down to the 20th of November, 2013. When I was, there's no other option than to get to the emergency room and see what they could do for me, because things had been just falling apart so badly. At this time, I had just turned 50 in 2012, and I was popped my rib in the gym, which I thought was just an exercise accident. But it turned out that was a result of the metastases that had already onset, and I didn't know it. So it never healed properly. And so went my year with over-the-counter pain medications and every kind that you can think of. I wasn't going to be getting into fentanyl or these other painkillers, because I was already aware of their destruction ever since the year 2000, when they were ushered in by telling us all that they weren't going to be any kind of problem by representatives of the pharmaceutical companies. So I already knew that was a no-go. And eventually, and you should see that testimony sometime, 2000, there's some doctor saying, well, we have no reason to believe this will cause any kind of addiction or any kind of problem for most people. And of course it did, and they paved the way for what's at hand right now. But I went in for the diagnosis on the 20th. I was in such brutal agony, I can't describe it. It's awful to think about it, but I only say it not for sympathy. I'm well past that PTSD stage. I say it to make it clear to people that I was so far gone. It's really incredible, especially under conventional standards, that I would be back to my life. And basically, I'm right in the pocket of time where I would be celebrating my 3rd anniversary of my funeral. That was guaranteed my way sometime between October and December 2014. So like, but the 10 to 12 months after I was ID'd with a rapidly deteriorating prostate cancer, aggressive advanced stage 4 that had already metastasized into much of my bones, but was guaranteed it was irreversible. They offered me, this is the best part, okay? This is the best part. This might sound horrible when it happens to you, and there's no doubt. But in retrospect, the best gift I received was being told that I was so far gone, there's nothing they could do. They couldn't do surgery, radiation, or chemo. That's what my prostate surgeon said, that one of the best in the country apparently, said that we can't do that. They offered me it's called an androgen therapy, and if you're not sure what that is, I'll break it down to layman's terms. This is basically a drug you take in on a monthly or tri-monthly basis, or maybe there's a bi-monthly, and it suppresses the body's ability to manufacture testosterone. And they consider testosterone to be the gasoline on the fire of what prostate cancer is. So if you're making testosterone, the prostate cancer is getting more out of control. So they like to shut that down. And I was told and promised that this was a palliative drug, and it was going to shut down the speed and the development and the intensity of the pain, and thus, quote unquote, it will help you ease on out. When I asked this guy, you're telling me there's nothing I can do? There's no other way to get out of this whatsoever? He said, no, I'm afraid not. And at that time, I knew he was incorrect. I don't know why he was telling me this, if it was a lie or a mistake, or he just wasn't up on his research. It might have been any of those things. I didn't care, but I could tell it was wrong. And I went away with the full awareness that there was nothing to do but soon get on this testosterone suppressant and no longer manufacture. If it was a woman with breast cancer and those kinds of related to gender diseases, then she would have had to take a similar suppressant, and this is available to cut down your production of estrogen to slow down that cancer or uterine cancer. So it's a very strange science. There's lots about it that's fascinating / also scary when it's happening to you. And I walked away from that terrible meeting in December. I was diagnosed in late November, and then 5 weeks later, I'm seeing the specialist who's telling me there's no hope and you're done and that's it and you're toast. What I left out of the story was, and I'll take any question you have after this, what I left out of the story was that immediately following the diagnosis on November the 20th, I had already made the decision to procure cannabis. This seems like a million years ago in the political landscape. Colorado wasn't even wide open yet the way it is now. And I just came across the idea to get involved with medical cannabis because I knew whatever this doctor in the emergency room was going to tell me, obviously it wasn't going to be good. And I didn't know what it was. And so I made that promise to myself that I would do it. And I started to do it within 4 days of getting, because I had 2 more days of work. I had to go to work that next Thursday, the following day, and the Friday. Saturday, I was able to procure a cannabis substance. Sunday, I was able to dial up on YouTube and Google, etc. What would you do with cannabis now that you have it? I realized there was a medical thing called the Rick Simpson oil. This is another Canadian guy who dreamed this particular application of this up on his skin cancer, found great effect with it. He told a lot of people about it and made it for them and gave it to them and remedied a lot of their cancers. And consequently, I don't know the saga. I'd love to talk to him, but he had to find his way out of Canada. Now lives in Croatia or something. Because, that's what happens when you don't charge anybody for a miracle cure. They want your ass out of here. So I guess that's what happened to him. I found out about it. I got, as they say, a little bit nervous and afraid to do it because it involves boiling volatile liquids, in this case, isopropyl alcohol, 99%. I was a little nervous of this. I don't have a chemistry background, but I proceeded to reread everything, watch some more videos, find the strength to do it, and once again, just hammer this stuff into me, because why not? I was in such a terrible shape when the emergency guy told me I'm stage 4. So I made it finally on the Monday. I took some of it Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. When I say some, I mean the size of the head of a pin. This is a very concentrated oil. You have to use it properly. But with 3 pinheads of oil taken into my body over the course of 75 or 80 hours, I was able to drop all of my over-the-counter meds. I no longer needed the hydromorphone, a morphine derivative kind of thing that they gave me on my way out of the hospital. And I couldn't believe it because I was in the midst of taking my morphine pill that day. And I realized, hey, I'm not in actual pain here. That's nice. I won't take this. and I carried it with me like an emergency supply. But I kept getting better and better and better from November 20th, my diagnosis, on the way to my 5 weeks later visit to the specialist, who told me, you don't have a choice, you're done, you're toast, we have nothing for you, take this drug to help you ease on out. That was scary at the time, but in retrospect, I see it was entirely liberating, because I didn't have to fight my doctor and say, no, I don't want chemo, or can I do this oil with the chemo? I didn't have to go there. I just decided I get to do whatever I want. They gave me no option. I'm trying this thing. And by the time I got on 5 weeks of this, I was feeling much, much better. I was able to move around, gain back some of my mobility. And when I went to see this doctor, he was expecting me to have at least the same terrible prostate-specific antigen score, the PSA, which was 700 when I was first clocked in. And then 5 weeks later, it was cut nearly in half to 374. This was a big head-scratcher for the fellow at the hospital, and I knew why. I was doing better. And so I proceeded to do this without telling him, and went back in early January, and got my first shot of this suppressant. I did that for four or 5 months, and then I said, that's it, no more. I can't take the side effects of this. And it was only a palliative anyway.
Yes.
Continued to get better and better. Had a subsequent relapse later on with, well, it was a bad quality oil, and I wound up crashing so hard. Now I had a 1,200 PSA, and these are terrible numbers. You're only supposed to have at most 4 or 5.
Yes.
And I mean, like above 0, not 700, not 1,200. And my metastases was so out of control that the fizzing away of the bones as a Tums tablet in a glass of ginger ale, but in slow motion, you lose the cohesion in your bones. They're just fizzing away. And you need to have a reading between 90 and 135 on that sliding scale to be normal. Mine now is. But at that time, I was 13 and change, 1,300. Mm-hmm. So that I had to stop that and have it come back down to, now your bones aren't fizzing away. And my new doctor, who's much more on board with all of this, although not 100%, said, it's incredible that your CAT scan now looks like all of those holes and the fizzing away of your bones have filled in again. And your CAT scan, it kind of looks like you're a cheetah standing there, the way your bone patterns, and like potholes in the road refilled with tar. That's what happened to my skeleton. This is called arresting and reversing metastases. Ask your doctor about arresting and reversing your metastases today. He won't believe it. You'll have to do the research. So that's where we're at. And then I eventually tried to tell people about it a little bit at a time, and I found myself telling people 3-4 hours at a time, just like I'm telling you now, single people, one at a time. And of course, this takes up a lot of time. So I decided to reconstitute my broadcaster skills I used to work at Sirius XM Radio. I had a show there called Conspiracy Queries. We touched on a lot of the same topics as WhatReallyHappened.com. And thanks for ever being there in the first place. My hat's off to this organization I'm speaking with right now, because you guys were there for such a long time, really turning over the facts. And I'm grateful for the conspiracy awareness that I have, because without it, I don't think I would have gone down that investigative road. I would have just believed my doctor. I would have gone home and told my wife, get ready to pack things up. Apparently, I've only got a year left. The last 4 or 5 months are going to be awfully painful. And I just threw all that out of the window, did my own thing. Now I have a podcast called Green Crush with Alan Park. We talk about how cannabis can crush cancer. We have all kinds of scientific data that comes in. This isn't a stoner show where you just sit around and get high and do a bong and talk about skateboarding, and I don't have a problem with that. I say go knock yourself out. There's a genre very well represented. This is more about even users of cannabis and lovers and enjoyers of it don't even know how deeply it can so affect you. So we can turn our focus to the lies of the government, telling people that there's no proof of this, because I have documentation and evidence that completely belies this fact. And Michael, my problem isn't procuring the information. My problem isn't speaking to the point. My problem is getting anyone in an official capacity to listen to me. That's the problem.
Well, I can understand, why that would be the case. I mean, here in the United States of America, the FDA and these various other government agencies aren't really interested in what's working for the American people. They see themselves as adjuncts, if not advertisers, for the corporate-produced products. And we've seen that same thing dealing with the issues of vaccine safety or dealing with the issues of GMO safety. And we've come to understand that these government agencies are there to serve the corporate interest and not the American people. And I've talked to a lot of people who are using the cannabis oil, which is the non-intoxicating distillate, for a wide variety of illnesses. And they're saying, it really does do some very positive things for whatever their ailments are. And when I was put in contact with you, cancer is a very scary thing. And for me, my mother died either of cancer or of the cancer treatment. When she first got cancer, they told her she had 6 months to live, and she hung on for 6 years. And I still don't know whether she died of the cancer or of the chemo and radiation, because that just ripped her up. And more recently...
Well, you raise a good point, because that's a crazy point, because so many people, we have statistics. So-and-so died of cancer this year. This many thousands of people died from cancer this year. Cancer took this many people this year. We hear it all the time. And each and every one of these individual cases, you don't know whether it was the disease itself or the alleged treatment they're in, or the combination thereof. Because each time you reset your immune system to purge it all with chemotherapy, it doesn't come back as powerful as it used to be, your immune system. It's a little bit lower. And sort of course, the danger is you were at your highest peak of it, most likely, when you first succumbed to cancer, before you even realized that, while it was developing quietly, like a villain who sneaks up on you and doesn't even have the balls to call you out. It's a very insidious, creeping disease.
Yes.
And so this is amazing to me that you say this, because if you really parsed every case and you bothered to do it, of course they don't, you would see much different statistics on treatment versus non-treatment, etc.
Well, one of the statistics I have is that 25% of all cancers will spontaneously remit. Your body will get rid of them. But the attitude is, we don't know which 25% are going to heal themselves, therefore we're going to treat everybody. And the conventional, accepted, very expensive treatments are very destructive of the body. It's already been established that if you use radiation to kill a tumor, then some years down the road, it's going to come back, and it's going to come back worse.
Yeah, and that's my fear, because I did get a blast of radiation on my second time, because it was so beyond any kind of reasonable expectation, and I had and things had amped up through my lack of having a proper cannabis on my second wave of this. And when I had to go back to the hospital of April 2015, I was in such terrible shape. I was experiencing all kinds of internal blockages that had just gone out of control. And so they zapped my back, because none of the pain, nothing was helping. And I did take the radiation treatment to shut down the pain.
Okay.
Now, the other side of that story is, my doctor said, this is only going to last you 5 or 7 months. And then it's going to come back, and it's probably going to be worse, and we're going to have to zap you again, and it'll be longer and more painful, and then it'll come back sooner in this ever kind of contracting window of it coming back. This is how you know the immune system keeps taking a kick when this happens.
Yes.
So I didn't like that I have to do that. But then again, that was 2.5 years ago. And 6 months ago, I said to him, remember when you told me it was only going to last 5 to 7 months? He said, yeah. I want you to throw out of the window all of the things I said back when you presented to me in April 2015, because you're just, I have no words. You're just doing so well. It's incredible. So I don't have that fear anymore, because I think what happened was, it was like a relay race where I had an emergency need for the radiation in my lower back and my sacrum, the bones surrounding the prostate and the whole area, that just completely riddled the cage around there, the hips, the back, the sacrum, the L3, 4, 5, all of that bone around there. And that's what they fried for 45 minutes on a directly high heat. It's a ridiculous gray scale. What is it? The gray scale, or whatever they call it. It's like 900, some ridiculously high number. I have to go back and look at that. Anyway, it was only supposed to last 5. He said maybe 5, definitely 5, maybe 7, maybe 9 months. And then you'll have to come back and do it again. And I'm so sorry. There's just no way out of this. Of course, it's been 2.5 years. I don't have any problems with the back whatsoever, because I've been right back onto the regimen. And I go on and off it. And I keep maintaining it. And I don't need to take the full crazy dose of 90 days of 60 grams. I just keep I'll do 10 days of a little tiny scoop at night before I go to sleep. It flattens me out for sleep. It makes me feel good. And you can really tell that it's working. And these people that are saying that it's not working, it is funny to me on the one hand, but it's very shocking that they're getting away with it. And Michael, at the end of this, regardless of the country, regardless of the region, whether it's California or some other country or Ireland or whatever, aside from Portugal and a few other cool places who have decided to get rid of chemical, get rid of any prosecution or anything of this nature, and they're having not a problem at all. What they're having is less people using drugs. They're having fewer drug-related incidents, fewer concerns about overuse of this stuff.
If the profit motive is gone,
Yeah, and it's really crazy to me because only a few people, relatively speaking, are setting these policies that most of us don't like. It's like 3 guys are in a room deciding what's going to be, and the other 97 of us are going, well, that sucks. I hate that. It's repressive. Okay, I'll do it.
All right,
I
Alan,
don't understand why we keep running.
Alan, we got to take a break here for commercials. Yeah. We'll be right back.
Oh, cool. Yeah. All right, thanks.
And aloha. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Alan Park. And Alan, I got an email here asking if you're using heirloom-based hemp oil or pharmaceutical GMO medical store-made hemp oil. I didn't even realize there was such a thing as GMO hemp at this stage of the game.
Yeah, okay. Let me take them. Is that the question? And which one am I using?
Yes.
Okay, so let me just take a quick note onto this before I answer that question. As far as GMO is concerned, people are on both sides of this issue. Some people say it's not a big deal. Other people say it is. I'm not going to argue that point right now, although I'm sure you've dedicated lots of area to that on your website.
Oh, yes.
What I will say is that GMO, whether you like it or hate it, there's apparently a plan in the works. Once now that Bayer Corporation, and they have a nice corporate history, don't they, have reabsorbed or merged with Monsanto, or somebody bought somebody. You're going to have Monsanto and Bayer as some kind of a collective entity. And I don't think it's any kind of a surprise that they are going to be trying to commandeer the supply of cannabis as much and around the world as they do right now with corn and soy that's been genetically altered. I don't like this. I don't want this. I think in these great secret laboratories of such cleanliness and sliding steel doors and vaults and airlock pressures and security cards to get in. You don't know, in a building at a pharmaceutical research center that's completely impenetrable, such as, the American Embassy in Israel or something. I'm sure it's that difficult to protect. And they're in there tinkering with these formulations. And I don't like at all that they could easily breed out of the cannabis plant or breed into the cannabis plant, whatever they want. The best thing you can get is sunshine-grown cannabis plant from tip to the bottom of the root. Tear it out of the ground when it's ready and use the entire plant and make it yourself and get it done that way. That's what I would recommend, because 1 plant equals 1 pound, give or take a few ounces. And that amount, when you cook it down properly, gets itself down to 60 grams of oil when you do it properly. And 60 grams of oil takes you 3 months, 90 days to ingest, because you can't take a gram a day to begin. You'll be on the moon, whether it exists or not. So you need to take a tiny, tiny dose and gradually build up your tolerance until you're able to take a gram a day. And that's why 60 grams is 90 days. So I recommend you have your sunshine-grown cannabis that hasn't been sprayed and hasn't been taken away by a policeman who thinks he knows what he's doing, and that you use this and process it your own, and that you find out how to do it, and you take responsibility for your own health, and you understand that you are not just bringing your car to the mechanic to get it fixed while you sit in the waiting room with a magazine. You have to actively take part in what's going on with you at every step of the way. If they give you meds, ask them what it's for and how many milligrams. Ask them how many more of these you're going to take. And every time they give you a cup of pills in the hospital, even if it's a nice nurse you always know, you just politely ask her, and what's this one for? And what's this one for? But to get back to the GMO thing, I didn't use GMO. I used, initially, I purchased, illegally off a guy on the street whom I happen to know, who's a friend of a friend and in a family that I know, a quarter of a pound. Of course, you need an entire pound, but I didn't have the money and I didn't have the space to cook it all up. I took a quarter of a pound of this, and this was a good quality weed that was not GMO. And it was not pesticided, and you have to do your due diligence to find that supply. In the face of the fact that it's illegal, in the face of the fact that a lot of your friends and neighbors are going to hold shame for you because they've been taught morals and apply them willy-nilly without reason. And you have to take responsibility for it 100%. That's what I say. So in that I was not able to get a plant from tip to tail to root growing in the sun, especially up here in Canada, I had to procure it elsewhere. And I did that. And then I told a lot of people about my story here and there because what originally was a secret, I don't want to tell anybody I have cancer. I don't want to tell anybody I'm using cannabis oil or anything else to get rid of it. I just want to get this behind me. I feel that I'm making progress. And when I'm back to normal, I'll just get my life back and carry on. It didn't work out like that at all. And once this stuff really did start to work, my mindset changed to, I can't keep this a secret. I have to share it. Because what if a guy comes up to me and says, oh, God, I can't believe it. I just got prostate cancer. And I'm going to sit there and keep it a secret, what I know, what got me out of trouble? No, there was no more choice of this. I had to tell everybody about it. And that's my safety. I mean, I tell everybody I'm doing it. I tell everybody I'm doing it illegally. I'm telling it. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't register with any corporation, even if I wanted to. And I did look into it at the front end of this. It would have taken anywhere from 2 to 3 to 5 to 7 months. Some people have waited over a year in Canada to get accredited.
I know how that works. Okay, Alan, we're going to have to take another break for commercials. Our commercials are spaced out kind of irregularly. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Alan Park, and Alan has treated his own cancer successfully with cannabis. And what is your current medical condition right now?
My current medical condition, as of May 2015, after I pulled out of the second bout, and I really did think I was going to go down for sure that time, because everything was worse the second time than the first time when it was terrible and guaranteed. So I really thought I was going to slip out. That's May 2015. All of a sudden, I'm starting to do well. I'm on the turnaround at the lowest point back up. And every 3 months, once you become stage 4, they don't like to let you go away forever, obviously. So I do and don't mind doing, especially with the Canadian healthcare system. I don't know what this would cost you guys in America. But I go every 3 months. And I do a series of blood tests, a CBC, they call it, and a alkalytic phosphatic acid. We keep track of that very much. This is the acid that becomes more predominant when your bones are changing from either growing strong or fizzing away. It registers an activity. You want that between 90 and 135. Mine is. It's somewhere around 115 the last time. Anyway, they keep taking these blood numbers and these tests every 3 months just to keep an eye on things. And so the idea being that if it spikes again and comes back, that I will still catch it soon enough, even if it happens soon after a visit. You know, in the first 3 months of not noticing it, you'd be able to catch it and get on top of things. And I just keep getting a clean bill of health, a clean bill of health, a clean bill of health. And my doctor, so I've been how many times? Every 3 months. Since May 2015, I just keep going back and they tell me nice things, and I carry about my business knowing I'm onto something.
Well, that sounds absolutely wonderful. And again, we know that prior to the rise of the big pharmaceutical corporations, that there were a lot of cures that were obtainable in nature. And when I was a kid, I had this first edition of an herbalist book, which I then gave away to a museum. And I regretted doing that because there was a lot of good advice in there. And then somebody found out it had been reprinted, and they sent me a copy. So now that's back in my library, and nobody's going to get that. But we know that pharmaceutical...
How old is it?
It's from like 1901.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really good stuff in there. We know that there have been very powerful cures for a lot of things going back, all the way to ancient times, all the way to Hippocrates, and a lot of cures that involve dietary change and things. But the pharmaceutical model is that you're not supposed to be able to treat yourself with anything that you can grow in the garden or buy at the supermarket. You will go to the doctor and get a note. You will go to the pharmacy and you will buy the pill there, even to the point where they're starting to basically take stuff that is found in nature and they change it around so they can put a patent on it and claim market exclusivity. And I think a good example of that would be Valium, which is actually comes from the valerian root. And you can buy valerian root without a prescription at any health food store. But they changed it around a little bit, called it Valium, patented it, and it's now America's most abused tranquilizer. But it's all about making money. And very often the actual health and wellness of the people is not an issue. In fact, the business model requires people to be chronically ill, to constantly require treatment for a wide variety of problems.
Absolutely.
And because if we all of a sudden got healthy, if we all grew a magic weed in our backyard and all of a sudden all of our illnesses and conditions went away, the entire medical industrial complex would collapse. And so there is definitely...
Yeah, boy, that's so true.
Go ahead.
Yeah. That's so true. No, go ahead. I'm just agreeing with you, yeah.
Yeah, and it really is, it's a very sick way of doing business, but again, not about Canada, but certainly here in the United States of America, medical treatment is just a big moneymaker. It's just another racket to pull money out of the people, and it's all about pushing product. And there was a good example that we had some years ago when my wife was dealing with some very serious joint pain, and we went the orthodox medical route, and she was given pills and creams and all the rest of it, couldn't solve the problem. Finally, we figured it out for ourselves. She was reacting to what are called formaldehyde precursors in low-end household and cosmetic products, and once we got those out of our lives, the joint pains went away. And the doctors never even suggested once there might be something in your household that is causing these issues. It's all about, we're going to give you another prescription, we're going to sell you another thing.
Yeah. Well, that's so true. And listen, I know that people don't believe this, and when I was initially coming out of it and telling people and they didn't believe it, I used to get really angry. I understood that I was being successful, and they're basically calling you a liar at that point. After you've come through some of the worst awarenesses, meditations, fear episodes, challenges, and then an eventual victory, to be treated like a liar and someone who is full of it is kind of disheartening, and I used to get upset. But then after some reflection and awareness, I did realize that when people say, that's all BS, I don't believe that, I am completely compassionate with this point of view, because I know they have been absolutely cluster bombed with disinformation. It's not always easy to parse your way through it. I mean, I might have different ideas about things of clandestine and hidden conspiratorial nature than you do. We might have different ideas on the Kennedy assassination. Who knows? But at the end of the day, this medicine works to the point where I'd like folks listening to write a few things down. I want you to Google this up and understand these facts. We all know about what's going on with real news, fake news. Everybody has an understanding of that. But go to the Real News website that's mainstream, called The Guardian in England. Type in The Guardian, November 4, 2001, cannabis miracle drug. Do that. And when you get to the article that was written and released, when? Just a couple of months after 9/11. When people were really distracted and upset and panicked and freaking out, and they were already sending people into Afghanistan because even though they didn't know it was coming, they knew exactly who did it. And this was all going on in November, late October, November, when the fires under the pile at the WTC weren't even out yet. That's when this article came out. Now, I'm not saying they're directly connected, but I know people, whether they were of a conspiratorial mindset or otherwise mainstream, were very, very busy researching in their own preferred choices of information about 9/11 and what's going to happen and are we going to go to war and blah, blah, blah. And so a lot of people might not have seen this article. Still on the line, still on the Guardian mainstream website. I'll give it to you again. The Guardian, that's a very well-respected, whether you like it or not, paper in England, a publication. The Guardian, November 4, 2001. And I would say download it, because if I keep talking about it, they're going to take it out. It explains in this article that is now 16 years old, thanks, that the time for anecdotal is over. In the article, it explains that for years, these claims, such as I'm making today and other people, these are all anecdotal. These don't mean anything, and this is just woo, and this is just hearsay. Well, there comes a time when there's a certain responsibility of those to accumulate these anecdotal stories, and you realize if there's so many of them that are anecdotal, why is it that so many people around different countries with different levels of cancer, different kinds of cancer, and other maladies, let's not limit it to cancer. This thing hits like a wide dispersal rate on a lot of different maladies, and I got a reason for that, and I need you to tell me before we're going to go, because I got a promise to give everyone this information. But this stuff works so well that in 2001, the British government had already been running tests and saying, yep, It's really working. This is really great. Then the article goes on to explain how, based on, this is a news article, not an opinion piece, by the way. A lot of those are valid, but this is a news article. It goes on to explain how they're going to have to finally relent, that based on the evidence that they have already accumulated 16 years ago at this point, that not pursuing the anecdotal stories and not pursuing the research on these tales of German guys, Polish women, everybody around the world is trying this thing and getting the similar results. Now, we're not all sitting in a room making sure we got our story straight. I don't even know these people. You deal with it on your own. You keep getting the same anecdotal story and doffing it off as anecdotal only. Now you're a criminal. Now you're responsible for the repression of helpful information, and I think you might have an agenda at that point. So look at this article, and it explains how in 2001 they decreed it anecdotal no more, that all of the test subjects and the test issuers, such as the doctors and lab assistants, all of them to a man and woman were blown away with results that were far above what they even had hoped for at the highest possible outcome. And it was much beyond this. This is solid science as of 16 years ago, at least in England. And guess what? There might be some other things from before that. And didn't an article just surface about how a certain means of suppression was revealed originating in 1974 in the early stages of Nixon's drug war, which came on the heels of what? The 60s, with the research put in by Lester Grinspoon in his books about cannabis. Listen, you want to research that guy too. Between him and Dr. Raphael Mechoulam, the Israeli doctor, through the 60s and others, by the time 1970-71 rolled around, we should have already been busting open how great this stuff was, and instead they took the juncture of a war on drugs and suppressing it, and then the news headlines became about how everybody's getting arrested, and this was a great thing to help also throw some shade, as they say, on these terrible, awful people who were protesting the Vietnam War involvement. So
yeah, and they were also voting Democrat. That was another reason for the war on drugs, because it was going after the hippies and the black population, and they were Democratic voters.
Sure.
Now, I found the article at The Guardian. I've just linked it to whatreallyhappened.com. Interestingly enough, in the search,
put it up there.
A more recent Guardian article came out saying, well, it's inconclusive that cannabis is... So, yeah, they got bought.
They got bought and they got waffled out, but this is the article that came out. You read that article at any time, and I think you should have it. I read it like almost every week on my show, Green Crush. I read it all the time, like it's a song you're going to hear over and over again. I take no shame in repeating lots of pieces of information on my show, because there's top 40 songs you hear a million times, and there's what kind of makeup Kylie Jenner's wearing a million times. So I can talk about this a million times, the same old thing. I put a little different spin on it. Here's another article from an organization called cancerresearch.co.uk. This is in England also, and they have a 2009 article that, when you find it, it specifically states that prostate cancer is curable with cannabis. It doesn't say has been shown to. That doesn't show maybe, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't show to be, could possibly be. It categorically states it is. And this is where I get a little bit upset in my own case, because I had this expert in 2013, 4 years after this article came out, about his game, about his gig, about what he does, telling him, if he were taking in the research, because you can't just finish your education ever if you're in a field like that. You keep learning. And I don't know how you can 100% say, there's nothing you can do. And then here's a 4-year-old article saying, this stuff totally works and here's proof. So I don't know how you reconcile that at night, even with the hundreds of thousands of dollars in the Lexus and the Rolls Royce or whatever. You know, I just don't know how these people manage to carry this stuff off. A lot of the people saying that this stuff doesn't work, it's worse than you think. They know it works. That's why they're keeping it. And I want to take 2 more minutes. I got 2 minutes. I got to say something. So let me know when I can to close this up, because you're so right about altering the food.
We have about 4 minutes until the next commercial break, and then about another 4.5 minutes till the end of the show.
Okay, well, forget the end of the show. I'll tell everybody now. Look, just use your common sense and understand something. A long time ago, about 80 years ago, so there's some old folks out there listening maybe that might even actually remember this, cannabis was legal and applied, and doctors were using it for a multitude of things. Not only that, but also it was growing in the fields, and hemp very similar to it. Also outlawed, of course, you wrote the Constitution on it, make clothes out of it, it doesn't deplete the soil, etc. Hemp, very similar to cannabis, is a fantastic thing to take as well because it has these CBDs in it, just like these are the cannabidiols that your body needs because your body has an endocannabinoid system. So let's start at the beginning. You're born, you have an endocannabinoid system, and you also have a system that requires vitamin C and B12 and enzymes and nutritional components, otherwise you don't get to keep on going. And you don't have CBDs because it's illegal. Now, 80 years ago, when they were still using hemp to feed what? Our pigs, our chickens, our cows, etc., our sheep, whatever we were eating back then in the way of eggs and meat, these animals were eating hemp as food. And they were getting, therefore, ingesting the CBDs. And then these animals went to slaughter. I'm not advocating meat eater. I'm kind of more of a vegetarian vegan guy. I'm just quoting history. This is fact, not hope. They put together, they've had their whole system of distributing around America. Just let's keep it to America since that's this audience. So you guys were all eating food that was coming from animals that were eating plants, the hemp plants that were later illegal, but they were eating this stuff. So that was in the food chain. And then you would eat those animals in your ham sandwiches and your bacon and eggs and everything else. And you were getting in, that was one of the nutrients you were taking in from your meats and your milks and cheeses and eggs back then. But then they took it out because it was illegal, right? That all happened really quickly. They rolled it over like a new paradigm. And farmers had to no longer feed their animals this stuff. And they started feeding them corn and soy and things like that. Which at that time, although that sucked compared to cannabis because they don't have the CBDs, although that was terrible, it's nowhere near as bad as it is now that they're feeding them genetically modified corn and soy and all of that while you're not getting CBDs. So go back in time to the beginning of Prohibition in the late 30s and put a pin in the map and make your little graph, and it'll go right on up the cancer spike. Now, I know we have improved cleanliness, etc., here and there, unless you're talking about the Michigan river systems. But it's pretty good, and on top of things, hygiene-wise, we have a pretty good handle on things not spreading from horrendous hygiene anymore. But it turns out that thing is such a powerful nutritional component. I'm talking CBDs in the foods. They've legislated it out. They've Monsanto'd it out. They've replaced it with something else. I'm sure they're going to do the same thing again with cannabis if you don't stop them, if you don't get your own supply, if you don't take your rights and say, you don't get to tell me if I have a plant or not. I got a cactus and an aloe vera plant and a basil plant in my house right now. You're telling me I can't have another plant? That's just ridiculous. But with no CBDs and 80 years of not having that. So in the first generation of a series of all of the you Americans and the Canadians too, not getting CBDs before they were even genetically modified. So you've got your cancer arc going up. And yeah, chemicals and yeah, pollutants in the air, but you're more susceptible to that when your immune system's already softened up and not strong enough because you're not getting one of the major components that it's begging for. And so what I say is this isn't even you can't let me have a plant in my house issue. You can't let me smoke a joint somewhere without getting hassled by a cop. I'm into a different level now. We need to get this back into the food chain as a supply to go back into the animals that you're going to eat. As much as I like vegetarianism, I know people are going to eat it.
Okay,
this is
Alan,
fact, not a hope.
Alan,
you got to do it.
Alan, got to cut you off for another commercial break. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha America, welcome back to the show. We're finishing up here with Alan Park. And Alan, listeners are already posting a whole slew of stories to whatreallyhappened.com. Let me give you some examples. From The Independent, teenager dying of cancer, gives him marijuana. Scientists say Darren's story validates we need to do more research into what's going on. This is from March of this year. From Lab News, also in Great Britain, cannabis destroys cancer cells. This is from back in 2006. Another article from 2015, I used cannabis oil to cure my cancer. This is a lady, Kelly McHugh, mother and businesswoman in Balito in KwaZulu-Natal. And let's see, Olivia Newton-John, the singer, uses medical cannabis to help with their cancer pain. And finally, we have an article, and this is from 2015. U.S. government says cannabis cannabis kills cancer cells, and they did tests where they showed cannabis was killing cancer cells in tests on mice and rats, but gee whiz, we shouldn't ought to let the ordinary people have it because it'll put the cancer industry out of business. And, you know, those alcohol and tobacco industries, they certainly are opposed to anybody having marijuana because, forget about growing your own recreational stuff in the backyard. You go to that store and you spend your money.
That's it. Oh yeah, we have a brewing scandal up here in Canada. I know everybody thinks Justin Trudeau's the sexiest guy and so fantastic, but that's because you're not using a microscope. He's doing a lot of weird things right now, and there's an investigation going on into he might have been illegally funded. You know, when you run for office, they have these limits. He might have been illegally funded by his good friend, whose name is Stephen Bronfman, into existence, and maybe they overspent, and maybe the election of this particular government is illegal. Wouldn't that be fascinating, though, that Stephen Bronfman, of course, is the heir to the Bronfman family clan. They are the Seagram's alcohol empire, and if you don't know who they are, you need to familiarize yourself with the Untouchables, because when America had the Prohibition, it was Canada making the whiskey and sending it down there, and these were rum runners and booze runners. These were illegal people proffering the alcohol business, and they took that under control, and this became a huge empire, and then Prohibition was lifted, but they still made a ton of money beyond that. They were up and away at that point. A virtual crime dynasty at the point, now turned into philanthropy. I always love that. Check that.
Okay, we got about 1 minute. We got 1 minute left.
So it's funny to me that right now this new restrictive control, if you will, over the marijuana and punitive new legislation they're trying to push through is being created by a guy that is the heir to an alcohol dynasty. So this stuff is always about history. Listen, folks, this stuff works, okay? It doesn't maybe work for everybody 100%, but it's certainly not something to be ignored. As soon as you get a diagnosis, if I were you, I say to protect myself, I would immediately begin this treatment. Because your doctor's going to tell you he wants to do something eventually, and then they will eventually start that thing, and you can give yourself one heck of a fantastic head start with this before you do any kind of conventional treatment.
All right,
so check it out.
Alan, thanks an awful lot. There's the music. We are simply out of time. I'm going to have you back on the show somewhere in the future. And yeah, if I were to come down with cancer, I would not go the conventional chemotherapy radiation route. I would definitely go this other direction here. And so, Alan, thank you very much for sharing time with us today. That's it for our show.
No problem.
Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. He's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you have learned on the show today and share it with everyone you know, and that includes, of course, our guest today and his story, along with Russiagate, Primary Gate, Dossier Gate. We'll be back tomorrow with the lovely lady Claire, so aloha, America.